Hey, I today would like to talk about light. Now, we are all these days living in tiny little teleconferencing boxes, half our day, sometimes half our night. And in those boxes, I tend to notice a few patterns. There are people who look like they live in some sort of cave. There are people who look like they're spending their coronavirus quarantine in the sun. And then there are some people who, well, I probably can't help these people, but we'll do what we can to try. Now, I'm a photographer, or at least I was when I was still allowed to go outside, and I love light. Humans love light. I imagine you have all sorts of ways to produce light sitting around your house. Light bulbs, windows, flashlights, cell phones, computers. We have all sorts of sources of light. We're going to use some of those to try to create the kind of light that actually looks good on camera. Let's talk about diffusing light. Now, if you've ever been to a photographer's studio, you may have noticed they use umbrellas. Sometimes they shoot light through it. Sometimes they bounce the light off the inside. And if you've ever been to a wedding, seen a photographer using a flash, notice they're rarely pointing the flash right at you. They're often bouncing it up at the ceiling or maybe off of a nearby wall. And if anyone has ever taken a photo of you where you have red eyes and look like you covered your skin in Vaseline, you're probably aware it's not enough to just point a tiny light at somebody and press shoot. Here is a really quick demonstration of hard light and soft light using a creepy head I purchased at Goodwill. I'm using a flashlight to simulate a single light source, the sort of light quality you would get from a bare light bulb or other small light. And I've got a typical plastic trash bag. It's translucent enough to let some light through, but opaque enough to scatter the light. It also smells like chemical perfume, but that's what I've got in my house. Notice what happens when the small light hits the trash bag. It creates a much larger light source. The difference between these two light sources is the foundation of everything we're going to worry about today. Now here's what Creepy Head looks like with only the single small light source hitting it. The light is harsh and unflattering. Creepy Head here has the advantage of being made out of plastic, but if she had skin blemishes, this light would really show them off. Now, I've inserted the plastic bag between the light and the Creepy Head. The shadows are softer, and the highlights are not so blown out. Let's take a look at our two images close up. Now, when I look at the bare bulb image on the left, I see a couple of problems. Right here in the shadow of the nose, we have a pretty hard line. That can look good in a fashion model shoot with a model with perfect skin or a lot of makeup, where we really want to show cheek lines, but it's also going to be distracting. It's going to really make any skin imperfections show up, and it's just not a look we're used to seeing in real life. We're used to seeing people out in like cloudy days or with light bouncing off of walls, creating softer looks. A harsh look like that we tend to associate with pretty extreme environments, so it's generally just not a look that day-to-day people find all that attractive. The other problem I'm seeing is these highlights. If you notice here, kind of in the bottom of the cheek, right here on the brow, any detail is really blown out. Now, it can be tempting to say the problem here is that the light is too bright, but cameras can compensate for that. It's pretty easy for a camera, especially most web cameras, to lower exposure or raise it up. So it's not brightness itself. The real problem is kind of the difference between the bright areas and the dark areas. So we have those brows compared to these shadows down here, say under the jaw. The contrast is high enough the camera is going to have a lot of trouble compensating for it. Now compare that to our image with the light diffused by the trash bag. You can see the shadows are a lot softer, so we get these nice smooth transitions between the shadow and the light. And you can see there's less contrast. It's not that contrast is bad, we just don't want too much. So we have some contrast, like here on the cheek, I kind of like the nice smooth transition into shadow, below the jaw. And even in the cheek, right, we can still see some shadow between like a little bit here under the eye, going down to the cheek, which is catching more of the light. To me, it's a more attractive, softer look, and it's much easier for the camera to compensate for. I do want to show you some good, inexpensive lighting setups that you can achieve on your own without spending money or breaking quarantine or putting yourself at risk. But before I do it, I also want to make sure you understand why the big light source makes such a difference so that you can go troubleshoot this on your own. The problem with the small light source is this. For any point on my face, it's going to be hit by all the light or none of the light. So above my eyebrow may be hit by all the light, and under my eyebrow is likely hit by none of the light. With the wax paper, however, The top of my brow may still be hit by all of the light, but perhaps under my eyebrow is not hit by the top, but is hit by the bottom. I get more of a gradual shaded effect that way. The simplest way I know to look at that, or to think about it when looking at a light source, is to imagine a single point, say, on my nose, and ask, how many different angles can that light hit it from? With the small light, it's a very narrow range of angles, and with the wax paper, it's a pretty large area of angles. So, in this painting of Rembrandt, it's pretty clear to me the light, maybe a candle by the painter, is only coming from a very small number of angles, and Mona Lisa is probably being hit by a large angle, source of angles of light, maybe a large window to her front right. All right, so you're in your house. You need to create a nicer, softer lighting, and you don't want to go out and violate quarantine or buy a bunch of stuff, and honestly, you shouldn't need to. Humans have solved these problems. We don't just sit around with bare bulbs in our house. If I put that bare bulb out, it's going to, hit that same problem, right? Light's going to be hitting the tip of my nose from a very small number of angles. So we know that's going to give us harsh light. Now, like I said, humans have solved it. We often use, say, lampshades over bare bulbs, and already that lampshade is going to increase the number of angles that light's hitting my face. Now, if the lamp's on the other side of the room, it's still not going to be a significant difference, right? The number of angles it's hitting me from, it's the same as sort of the amount of field of view that lamp takes up in my field of vision, not that close. But it's not just about the size, it's about how close the lamp is to my face. So if I have the ability to put a lamp just out of frame, so the camera's not picking it up, near my face, then it's going to create probably a pretty soft look. And for a great many people, that's honestly all you might need to do. So a lamp works, but you might not have a lamp. You might not have room on your desk for a lamp, or maybe when you put the lamp close to your face, it's just too bright relative to the other light in your place. Earlier, I talked about the photographer's umbrella, right? Now, an umbrella is not really much different than a light shade or a lamp shade or anything. It's just capturing the light into a larger shape. It's translucent, so it lets light through, and it's functioning in the same way as a lampshade. Photographers use them just because they're easy to carry around and put away, but we can use almost anything that's large and translucent. When I first started out in photography, I didn't own any lighting modifier, so I did one of my favorite stupid MacGyver tricks. I used a shower curtain. I hung it up on a clothes rack, and that effectively created a large translucent surface. So if I were to put that in front of my desk and then put a bulb behind it, it's going to send light at me from this huge surface. It could be one of the nicest looks you can get, using just a simple shower curtain or even the plastic trash bag from earlier. Putting any kind of translucent surface between you and the light is a great way to soften it and get a nice look. I was telling my friend Alex about the shower curtain solution last night, and he asked, well, I have a large wall right in front of my desk. How do I solve that? I mentioned wedding photographers bouncing light off of walls and ceilings earlier as a way to solve problems. We can use walls to our advantage, especially if they're neutral colored or white, because a light is basically going to bounce off of that wall, right? So if I take my bare bulb, right, I'm going to have that same problem before, but it's sending off light in every direction, right, including hitting that wall. So I can bounce the light off the wall and right back into my face. Now, this isn't going to completely solve the problem because the light is still going to be going directly from the bulb to my face. That's still going to create that harsh look, but I can solve that by blocking the light that's coming directly from the bulb while still allowing the light from the wall to hit me directly. And I'm going to demonstrate that real fast because it probably looks more complicated here than it really is. Here's a quick demonstration of the wall. We've put my weird head here, and we have a light bulb, and we have a wall. Now, if I turn the light on, we're going to see it is pretty harsh. Still getting those strong shadow lines right there on the face, and a lot of the light being blown out compared to the shadows. So too much. However, we're going to try to block the light so it's bouncing only off the wall with a piece of aluminum foil. All right, I wrapped the aluminum foil around the lampposts. Nothing precise at all. As you can see, I've just sort of left it exposed to the door. So it's lighting the whole door up. It's created a much bigger light source, but there's no direct light coming from the light bulb to the face. And if we look at the weird head's face now, we can see we have these nice soft lines by the nose. We can see that, yeah, there's still highlights and contrast on the face, but it's not being blown out. It's just a much nicer look, all because this door is bouncing that light off and creating a much bigger light source. If I were bouncing off this green wall, we would get some color casting. It might not be too bad, but you want something white or gray or neutral if you can. So that's the wall solution. I like it because I'm geeky and I like complicated things like bouncing light off of things. But I should point out, if you do have the ability to put a lampshade near your face, the angles may not be all that different, and that might be an easier solution. So do what works for you. I will say one last thing. Ring lights. I've heard a lot of people talking about them. I happen to have a ring light and I like it. This is a ring light. And the important thing about a ring light is it is big enough that it's sending light from a lot of different angles, right? That's the whole point of a ring light. So this is a ring light I'm showing you. I don't think you need one, as long as you can create a large light source. If you have one, great. However, this is technically a ring light. It's also a piece of crap. Do not buy one of these unless you're an entomologist who enjoys taking photographs of insects. It's too tiny to make a difference. Going off what we learned before, right, that it's all about the angles the light's hitting your face from, this thing is not going to create any kind of wide light dispersion that's going to help you in any way. Before you start playing with your lights, though, please don't put anything flammable or meltable near a heat-producing light bulb. Covering and surrounding yourself with light is great. Covering and surrounding yourself with flames is a terrible idea. It's actually great for creating an even light source, but it's really awful for your skin quality. I do want to hit on one last problem you're going to have to solve, which is this. I've kind of implied in the demonstration so far that the lighting in the background is shadowy or darker or is just sort of taking care of itself. It's actually okay if you want to have a bit of a lighter background. You're probably going to have to avoid any direct windows or any chance of direct sunlight coming in and hitting the background because you're going to have a hard time competing with the sun. But as long as the light hitting your face is brighter, even just a little bit brighter than the light in the background, you can get away with a pretty bright background. Where you run into trouble is if that lighting in the background overpowers the lighting in the foreground, then you're going to start seeing either a completely blown out background or you are going to look like you're sitting in a shadow. So you'll have to kind of solve that along with solving your lighting problem. But, worst case, just try to darken things down in the background. All right, that's the basics of everything I think you need to know to get started. You don't need to throw money at lighting problems. There are other things we could talk about, using multiple lights to create lights from different angles, although you still have to deal with how sharp the shadows are. You have to make sure and match light temperature. We could talk more about backgrounds, but this is enough, I hope, to get you started. If you'd like to see more, and you do want to throw a little bit of money at this, you could consider buying me a coffee. I'm at Venmo at Tony Beeman, or PayPal at Tiny Beeman, or Patreon at Tiny Beeman. You can also just visit my website, tinybeeman.com, where I collect improv and photography resources. I'd love to produce more content like this, so let me know if you're interested. Thank you very much.